Sing to Me Softly. Written by Last Archangel. Read by Rashi. Oh, how sweetly sings the bluebird. Dorothea was always at perfect peace while singing. It had given her opportunities that other poor orphans would have never seen in their lifetime. Her past had seen the glitz and glam cover up the torn soul beneath it all. She had lived in that gilded cage for so long, but had left it all behind, all to meet her predecessor and find a noble to woo. Funny how things had changed within a year. Now, Edelgard was in control, and the war was over. Dorothea had things to really sing about these days. Her job at the opera reinstated, with the knowledge she was a war hero now. The people flocked to her shows and showered her with praise. Dorothea knew deep down the smiles she gave were genuine, but the war had left a bitterness in her mouth, one that knew she couldn't sit still and be that little bird on the stage. The political ideologies that Edelgard had been ushering in had meant a lot of upset at first, but she had offered her talents on stage to try and spread support for her new friend's reign over the entirety of Fodland. She would do anything to help Adie. She owed her everything. Though Dorothea could have never predicted her loyalty would be tested as much as it was. "Dorothea, Her Majesty awaits you. I am to escort you to the throne room." Hubert had arrived at the opera house rather early, well before any shows were to be put on. At least, he'd given her the courtesy of a knock on her dressing-room door. The conversation had been simple and short. Edelgard needed her help with some negotiations, and Hubert had hinted it was of urgency. Not wanting to disappoint her friend and emperor, Dorothea had conceded. A few arrangements had been made for her understudy to take the stage that night, while she dealt with what could be lengthy discussions. "Thank you, Hubie." Accepting his offered arm, she let him lead her to the throne room, where upon her royal seat sat Emperor Edelgard. Bowing before her friend, as was customary for subjects, it was Edelgard who motioned for her to stand. "You are my friend, Dorothea. You are a war hero. You do not need to bow before me. Not when it is just us and Hubert. I have asked you here for something important, and I hope you will be able to assist in serving our nation much more at the forefront. I wouldn't normally ask this of you, or any one of our friends, but I've been put in a tricky situation with our negotiations with Brigid." Brigid was making things difficult? Petra had not ascended the throne yet, but she had always been passionate about negotiating the treaty between the nations. Why would there be issues there, unless it dealt with her grandfather's wishes? Petra had once confided in her that traditions were different in Brigid than in Fodland. As Dorothea stood there waiting for the clarification, she saw the empathy in Edelgard's face, a bad sign for the songstress. "What is it, Adie? You know I will do anything to help. I promised you this when we won the war." Hubert exchanged a glance with Edelgard before the Emperor took to her feet. Stepping down the stairs, she approached Dorothea calmly. Upon taking Dorothea's hands in hers, Edelgard spoke the words that shattered the brunette's reality. "Petra's grandfather has asked in our treaty agreements to help establish alliances that he wishes his granddaughter to be married to someone in Fodland, someone who will be a show of good faith as they establish themselves back as their own nation, no longer under our rule. I have talked with Petra already in private and discussed her options. At the end of the day, it is your choice, but I wish you to enter into a marriage with Petra and be her queen as she takes rule over Brigid. I know this is a lot to ask of you both, but when I mentioned possibly asking you, she pleaded with me to ask you, as she trusted you completely, and if she was to be in a marriage not of her choice, then she wished to be married to someone she valued as her friend. I can give you the time to think if you—" "I accept." "Are you sure, Dorothea? This isn't a small decision. You will be leaving Fodland and becoming a political wife. I know I would not ever wish that on someone else, even if I know deep down that it will be my own fate. Dorothea knew all too well that as emperor, Edelgard wouldn't be able to marry the woman who had stolen her heart. No, she would be expected to have a noble husband or wife. Hopefully, she'd be able to let the public see how much she loved their old professor. It was why Dorothea was willing to do this. If I do this, then you must promise me something, Adie. You show the public that nobility is a thing of the past. You marry the one you love. If one of us is to be in a marriage for show, then the other deserves one of love. You've sacrificed enough for us all. It is our time to return the favor. Edelgard had always been a woman of stoic qualities, one who guarded her heart and emotions at the door. Dorothea knew the woman behind those lies, so it wasn't a shock to feel her friend embrace her warmly. I will honor your promise, my dear friend. Perhaps you and Petra will discover how to make things work for the better. You both deserve to have that comfort. If both women shed tears together, then Hubert wouldn't say a word, nor would both of them. This was for the good of their nation, and to assure that no more war would wage between one another. You look stunning, Dorothea. Bernadetta's reclusion was still an issue for most. Her skills with sewing had helped in designing parts of the dress that the songstress would wear for her wedding. When Dorothea had initially asked for her design ideas, a few other ladies in court had told her that she should go to a proper designer instead of the Varley shut-in. It had been Hubert's idea to ask his wife, and Dorothea had trusted both her friends. The final result was stunning. The reds and golds complemented the Adrestian-inspired designs that Bernadetta had looked at when working on the dress. She had wanted something to wow both nations while highlighting Dorothea's national ancestry. The wedding was to be held in the rebuilt Enbar, the whole city celebrating the nuptials of the day. It's all thanks to you. Please tell Hubie that he deserves a little credit for showing me some of your other designs. I'm so glad I get to wear something you made, Bernie. The young woman blushed at the compliment and seemed ready to run when Dorothea took her hand. I mean it, Bernie. I am proud of you and honored to wear my friend's masterpiece. Today is going to be a happy day. The blushing cheek still present, but it seemed to have calmed the other woman down. Hubert had told her that Bernie had worked hours on end to make things perfect for her, and it really showed. They had been the first of their old classmates to marry, but seeing how deeply devoted Hubert was to Bernie had shown that any worries were premature. They had ousted her father after Edelgard's coup, and now Bernie was free to be true to herself. Dorothea hoped that even if her own soon-to-be marriage was purely political, she could count on Petra, like Bernie did with Hubert. The final touches on her makeup and jewelry were quickly finished, and Dorothea was gifted the opportunity for one last look in the mirror. No longer could she see the orphan girl singing as she scavenged for scraps or used the fountains to wash her tattered clothes. No, the woman who looked back would make that girl proud. She fought back tears in fear that the makeup she had on would be ruined, but Dorothea was a songstress, a lady of the stage. She knew how to keep those emotions at bay when necessary. Still, she had followed Manuela to Garrick Mach, and had tried to find a future spouse to ensure she never became destitute again, only for those aspirations to mold into something far different. She had soothed those on the battlefield and off it, using her talents with magic to provide support to Edelgard's cause. And now she stood before a mirror in a dress made for a queen, seeing herself properly for the first time in years. Maybe this would be the best chapter of her life. While the church had been torn to the ground in the symbolic sense, the cathedrals about the land had been converted into many things. Today, One had been used for the wedding ceremony, to unite both nations. The stained glass windows made the room really light up with the sun shining behind them, making the room dance with color. Petra stood at the end of the aisle, having had her grandfather lead her down the aisle first. Her dress was much more traditional to the island nation prior to the long-past colonization by Dagda centuries ago. Her name still held the long-since-crossed royal bloodlines of both nations, though. Dorothea took a deep breath and glanced at Ferdinand as he took her arm in his. Without a father alive to give away the bride, she had asked him if he would do the honor. After almost fainting in shock, he had dropped to one knee and promised her that he'd proudly do the honor. That had earned a genuine laugh and a smile from the songstress. After they had cleared the air about their past, he had become almost a brother to her, the rest of the Black Eagles having been her found family through the war. And now she was to marry one. No turning back now, eh, Ferdy? The words whispered as she felt like she wasn't able to break the cover of a happy bride-to-be. Ferdinand patted her arm and happily whispered back jokingly, "If you wish to run, I can hold off Hubert and Edelgard while you dash away." That earned a far more genuine smile on her lips. "Not necessary, Ferdy. I promise I'm okay with this. Petra is my friend, and so is Edelgard. I'm not letting them down by not being willing to help where I can. I'll just miss having you stopping by after performances to treat me to dinner and conversation. Promise me you will visit when you can. That's all I can ask." The music began to play before he could answer, but as the doors were about to open, he assured her, saying, "If you or Petra ever need one of us, we will be there for you. You two are our family too." Those words were what carried Dorothea smiling down the aisle, her train hem held by none other than her maid of honor and mentor, Manuela. The former songstress had taken up a teaching position in Enbar, but had been happy to serve such a duty for her former student. As Ferdy handed her off to Petra, he gave them both a wry grin and a wink before stepping back to his seat next to Linhart and Caspar. No turning back now, she thought to herself. The words spoken by the priest from Brigid were words foreign to her Adrestian ears, but Petra had walked her through the traditional ceremony. The flowers spread in a circle around them, symbolizing their union. As he presented them with the hand-woven bracelets and their rings, practiced words recited by both women, Dorothea having let Petra patiently teach her what she needed to say. While the marriage was one of politics and treaties, she would not embarrass her future wife and good friend by not honoring those traditions with the utmost respect. The prayer to the goddess above that served Brigid's people through spirits and rituals was something that gave the songstress bumps along her skin. This was far more important than she had realized, as Petra stood there in utter reverence. Such a sight was rare for the future queen, that Dorothea was entranced as she watched. Finally, the modified ceremony came around to an end, with the expectation of both women to kiss one another. Petra turned to face her, and Dorothea could almost believe that this was a wedding for love. Cupping the other woman's face, she leaned in till their lips met. The kiss was far different than any other Dorothea had experienced before. This one was meant to convince not only everyone else, but herself, and she succeeded. Upon pulling away, the songstress smiled gently at her now wife. Petra had a light blush on her cheeks as she stared back at her, happiness in her eyes. Had Dorothea missed something in the times they had talked? "We are here, Dorothea. That's Brigid." The party the reception had become was long and tiring for both women, and they had passed out on the bed. Nothing but a few drunken kisses Before Dorothea was still questioning, Petra had been giving her looks whenever she thought Dorothea wasn't looking, and she figured she would have to ask her wife about them soon. Was something wrong, or had Dorothea not questioned enough why Petra had insisted Edelgard ask her, of all people, to be her queen? The thoughts had distracted her the whole voyage to Brigid from Enbar. What did Petra mean to her? Sure, she cared for the woman as one of her closest friends, but why did she always feel a little sad as Petra walked away to do her own thing? Was that normal, even in an arranged marriage? The songstress, however, had been drawn from those confused thoughts as Petra exclaimed that they were home. The hug from her wife was loving, as was the surprise kiss on her cheek. It felt natural as they approached the jungle outlined shores, the welcome party there to greet them. Petra had told her it would be all the important officials and royal attendants. Her grandfather had left far earlier from Enbar to be there to set up their welcome. He stood there proudly as they both stepped off the ship deck onto the docks. Dorothea could feel her heart almost burst with happiness when she watched the king hug his granddaughter as she rushed onto the sands where he awaited them. Petra had always seemed so lost in Adrestia, her homesickness clear with anyone who was able to hear her speak about Brigid. To see her in her homeland was as if she had been gifted a secret look into Petra's life. Her wife reached a hand back towards her, and Dorothea found she was truly smiling as she took it in hers. Maybe this wouldn't be some boring marriage to some noble, forced to pretend to enjoy court. Perhaps she would have a home that welcomed her for more than her voice. The welcome party was apparently only the start. The bonfire on the sand, as people feasted about in their honor, the far less stuffy kind of greeting from the nobility of the empire. Dorothea kept sharing glances with Petra, and even asked her, "Is this typical for everyone welcomed home? It feels much happier than the welcome parties I'm used to." Petra had taken a moment before answering, but when she did, it wasn't without taking Dorothea's hand in hers. "We enjoyed the chance to celebrate, yes, but this was for you. The people of Brigid want to make you feel at home here. The goddess watches over us, and the people believe you to be part of them now. It is a blessing from her that we were wed. They dance for our future, and the future of peace." It was then that Petra led her to the sands near the bonfire, where others were dancing to the beat of the drums. It took a few moments to get into the rhythm, but soon Dorothea was giggling with her wife as they danced together, barefoot on the white sands beneath. As the party wound down, she found herself with Petra, walking alone down the beach shore, hand in hand, their toes dipping in the shallows as the waves brushed their ankles. Petra was a few inches shorter than her, but the strength was clear as she tugged her to the sand where they fell, Dorothea collapsing onto her wife from the motion. Staring down at Petra's pale eyes, full of hope, the woman made a decision, one she had been so unsure about before. Kissing her wife, she let instinct and unrealized feelings bubble forth. The kisses led to soft caresses between the two, eventually them abandoning the beach for the room they had been gifted in their part of the palace. Things ended as warmly as they had begun. Dorothea held the sleeping Petra in her arms. Maybe this was the love she had been looking for after all.